Exactly. So, welcome everybody to the KindHive's webinar about kindness not being weak, but actually being a strategy. We are delighted you can join us, and we would love you to just give us a little in the chat, interact and just give us a little idea of where you're joining us from. So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat to each other, that would be fantastic. And then in the meantime, I can introduce a little bit about how the webinar is going to run. And of course, most importantly, our panelists, because this is why you're all here. And this is why we're here together today for the next hour. So my name is Nicole Bachmann. I am one of the founders of KindHive. Who is KindHive? Well, we exist to show that kindness creates business value. And not just about through big programs, but through actually practical actions that make a difference and deliver measurable results. I am delighted to be joined by five panelists today. I'm afraid we can only see four because, as always, in all proper webinars, there's some technical issues, and one of our panelists could, unfortunately, the camera won't like our go-to webinar. So, but we can hear Arif, which is the most important thing. So let me just introduce who we have in the room. So we have Natalie Sem, who is our very own kindness expert and tech innovation champion. Then we've got Barbara Watkinson, who is the head of leadership and development of Charities AIDS Foundation. Then we've got Lisa MacLaren, who is the ex-head of talent acquisition delivery at Williams Racing. We've got Arif Kamal, who is the man you can't see, but you can hear him, Chief Finance and Operations Officer of Hunters LLP. And then we've got Andrew Bridge, who is the Managing Partner of Fisher German LLP. And all five of them are kind leaders who are wonderful humans and who are very kindly making time for us today to share our journeys. Share our journey and share their journeys with us. So I will give them a chance to introduce themselves in a moment. Let me just a couple of things regarding how it's going to work. So please, as I said, do introduce yourself in the chat if you fancy that. That would be lovely to just put your name and maybe where you're from and where you're joining us from in the chat. That would be great. Otherwise, please also, I think a few of you have already seen the questions section. So if you have any questions during the webinar, I will be fielding those into the discussion. So please use the question sections ideally, because that would be really easy for me to then find the questions, but I will obviously also monitor the chat. And so great to see. Hi Sam, hi Fleur. It's great that you already telling us that you're joining. That's great, and I'm sure there'll be some other people joining you in a minute. So enough of me. I would very much like the panelists each to tell us a little bit about themselves, and also, especially, of course, because we're all here about kindness, is what kindness does mean to you. And because we can't see him, maybe we'll start with Arif, so you all know he's really there.
That's very kind of you, Nicole. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I am currently the Chief Finance and Operations Officer for Hunters Law LLP. It's a 310-year-old law firm based in Lincoln's Inn. I have been with this firm for 7 years, just over 7 years. But throughout my career, I have tried to emphasize that kind leadership is critical, and for it to work, from my point of view, the commitment has to be from the top. So at the management board, strategy board, or operations board, I emphasize that leaders need to lead by example. And it is, a bad world as it is. So gentleness doesn't do any harm to anyone. So that's what I follow, but more of that a bit later. So that's a brief introduction. Nicole, is that sufficient for this moment?
Brilliant. I'm absolutely amazed. Thank you. Fantastic. So shall we go to Barbara next?
Thanks, Nicole. Barbara Watkinson. I am the Head of Learning and Development at Charities AIDS Foundation. I suppose something interesting about me is I technically retired 4 years ago, but was called out of retirement by a kind leader. So someone who I had worked with in the past and who I hugely admired, who uses kindness as part of his leadership strategy, became the CEO at Charities Aid Foundation. And despite the fact that I'd retired, asked me if I would come and work with him. And I think for me, that's part of one of the benefits of kindness is people do want to do the unusual and unexpected for you. And it was very unexpected for me to come out of retirement. But here I am, and 4 years on, still working for the same leader at Charities Aid Foundation.
And kindness means to you?
So what kindness means to me is it's a very intentional way of operating, which thinks about what's the good that can come out of my actions and my leadership, and what's the best possible good that I can achieve. So I'm trying to weigh up everything to provide the best possible result at the end of the day.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Lisa.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Lisa MacLaren. So I'm a TA, professional talent acquisition professional, and currently doing some consulting. And I believe that kindness enables you to get the best out of people. I've always strived to lead my teams with kindness, care, and compassion, and be truly authentic myself. I believe if I'm authentic, then that enables others to be themselves, which frees you up to do your best work. And sometimes that requires you to be kind to individuals to enable them. And sometimes that requires you to be kind to individuals to gently redirect them, because they may not be in the best place or in the best role. And from a talent perspective, sometimes you just have to nudge and be a little bit more direct, but it is actually kind in the long run.
Yeah, kindness is clear, and lack of clarity is unkind. Yeah, that is certainly something that speaks to you, Natalie, I have no doubt. You want to go next? You're on mute, Natalie.
Apologies. Yes, that was great. That always happens once in a conference, so there you go, I did it. Yeah, so I'm Natalie Sems. I'm a co-founder of KindHive. My career's been, I've been a career technologist and engineer, have created big software platforms for large organizations, and was responsible for setting up a business within KPMG, which was a software as a service business for banking, which became hugely successful, but it started from nothing. And I guess for me, kindness is about connection with people, right? So it's about authentically connecting with people, connecting them with the clarity of a vision that you have to do something amazing, and showing you care about those people, and recognizing the value that each and every single person can bring to the table. And if you do, I think if you're able to somehow encapsulate those 4 pillars of kindness, the most amazing outcomes are absolutely possible. And that business that I co-founded at KPMG as an entrepreneur grew to be 150 million a year business from nothing, in a company that had no technology to start with and became a tech company. And you know, we didn't have any people who had particular expertise in technology, and we had, you know, people who graduated from college, people who were, you know, secretaries, people, you know, and they all became part of my team without having necessarily all the right background, but with the right goals, you know, that were aligned, and the right determination and will to get something, to do something amazing together. And we managed to do it. So for me, that's the power of kindness, is being able to really tap into our human potential. And as Barbara said, the best that we can possibly bring to the table. So I totally, absolutely believe in that.
Yeah, fantastic. Andrew, what does kindness mean
Tough
to
gig.
you?
That's a tough gig to follow, isn't it?
Ah,
Thanks, Nicole. I think so I'm Andrew Bridge, I'm managing partner of Fisher Gem. We're a property consultancy, 800 plus people in the UK, based across 26 offices. And when we talk about kindness, I think from a personal perspective, it's very much actually how I would like people to treat me, and that comes from maternal. So how my mum would expect me to be able to respond, and how she would expect me to be able to act, and how you're making someone feel. So ultimately, it doesn't matter who it is in your organization, it doesn't matter who it is outside of your organization. From a personal perspective, it's you want to treat people with respect, with dignity, and with that thought process of actually how can I allow that individual to be the best version of themselves.
Exactly, and that's fascinating. And again, what I love about all five of you, from what I've experienced so far, is that the most important thing that we found, and Natalie will tell us more about that later, is that unless you live it every day, whatever you say doesn't matter at all. And I think everything I've heard already from the five of you just tells me exactly that. It's you're living it every day, and you're working with people who are living it every day. And that's where the benefit kicks in. And that's also where the expectation of kindness kicks in, which then creates this wonderful spiral of people being kind to each other, and, more and more being kind to each other, which is fantastic. So I would like to invite you all to get yourself off mute now, because, as I say, the main idea of this webinar is very much you discussing amongst yourselves. And obviously we've got some questions that we would like you to discuss, but at the same time, I'm here to just literally make sure that the audience has a voice if they want one. But it's really very much about your expertise and your experiences, because you have wonderful journeys that you can share, and it's the case studies and the journeys that people are so interested in. So maybe a good place for all of us to start is to think about, okay, so everybody says kindness, great, and everybody believes that it's something that's important on a human to human level. We understand that. However, why is it so important as a business? What is it that makes it so beneficial for the actual business to, create a culture of kindness? Whoever wants to kick us off, feel free.
I can go first if you like.
Please, Arif.
Sure. I think a business is not just a place to win or just compete with other people. It is a place to belong. And if it's a kind business, people are naturally, in my experience, engaged with what the organization is all about. And they are part of the success story in the end, because it's not about just delivering results, it's about building meaningful relationships. And you can only do that if you're a kind, so to speak, leader, kind person to interact with, and you have got empathy, and you've got some understanding and listening capabilities to others' views as well, and not just impose as a leader, this is the direction we are heading in, and this is what you will do. So in order to engage people, you have got to listen, understand, empathize with them, and understand what is important to them as well as what the organization needs. So sometimes you will need to be cruel to be kind.
Mm.
That's
Well, you say the word belonging is the strongest word I heard of that. And yes, absolutely, kindness also includes some clarity and therefore challenge around that. So let's talk about belonging a little bit more.
sure.
I think from my perspective, starting my career in a pretty sales dominated environment of agency recruitment, um, it was incredibly important to create a sense of belonging, because it was really hard work what we do, and especially you're working often with really young people. People come into recruitment in their early 20s. They have limited life experience, and I made it my kind of mission as a young leader, as a manager, to create a safe and kind environment where they could feel able to not just be themselves, but also make mistakes, and not feel scared about making mistakes, and be able to provide those opportunities to connect them with individuals who could help them on their growth journeys. And I think that helps to create a sense of belonging, where you're creating those connections, and maybe sometimes having to sort of slightly force those connections for people who aren't used to doing that themselves, so that they then understand how to do that and how to benefit from that, and classic things like mentoring programs. I think that that's a great example of being able to create a sense of belonging, so that people feel they have someone to go to, when perhaps things are a little bit overwhelming. So yeah, I don't know if that resonates with anybody.
Yeah, I think Lisa, just to pick up on that, sort of your safety piece in respect to psychological safety in an organization, sort of creating that trust element is key to creating high performing teams. So ultimately, we're in business to try and ensure that we can fulfill whatever that vision might be, what our purpose is as an organization. With a large lump, there will be trying to create some level of revenue and trying to create some level of profit. So I suppose to sort of pick up on Arif's point in respect of sometimes kind can get mistaken for being nice, and I think there's some differentiation there between being kind at times can be delivering a very difficult message, or could be dealing with someone within your team that actually is looking at something in a very different way, but actually be able to deal with it professionally and to ensure that at the end of the day the outcome is the right thing for the business and it's been done in a way that is thoughtful and is taking consideration of other people's feelings through that process, which can be
Mm.
quite challenging. And people that don't naturally really, well, a large number of people don't really like the potential to upset people or to create a level of conflict or differentiation, but at times that can be the kindest thing to do.
Just to comment on that point, Andrew, which just made, that you need to be authentic and honest as well, at the same time being kind, because no point in being ambiguous as to what the message is. So you can be kind, but you need to be honest without, diluting the commerciality which is required for any business. So that is important as well.
I was just going to give a little story of in my early 20s, I worked for a boss and had got to the point where I was determined to leave the organisation and to move on. But before I could, a new boss came in who absolutely operated with kindness, was kind in terms of the hard truths, in the fact that because I was thinking that I might leave, I might have slacked off a little bit and perhaps wasn't performing quite so well, but delivered those messages with such kindness and care for me as a human being that within no time at all, I changed my mind about wanting to work in that organisation and to do my best, and found myself wanting to go the extra mile. And nothing else had changed. There was no other additional responsibilities or anything other than somebody who was absolutely willing to deal with me in a way that was both kind and firm. I saw he was my first ever example of when the two need to work together beautifully in order to get the best out of someone. And I think what he got from me was a level of commitment that was, he used to have to shoo me out the door on an evening to say, go home, because because I got such a sense of wanting to do well for him and to do a great job. But he wasn't soft or nice and didn't pussyfoot around the issue that actually, because I'd lost my motivation, that I actually was underperforming.
And imagine the commercial benefit just from his interactions with you, of not losing a member of staff, not having to backfill that position, and all the associated costs with rehiring and training someone into a role. So just these just that little thing just had a commercial benefit to the business in itself, and to you, of course, but if we're talking about the business benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting, that just brings me back to one of my very first, when I first was employed. And again, like you, Barbara, I had somebody similar, and the atmosphere of everybody was really looking forward to Monday morning, and everybody loved going into that business. And, a few years later, he was replaced by somebody who did not understand that, and how quickly that can change. It was fascinating. So maybe, Natalie, you will have some more stuff around that, no doubt.
Yeah, I was just going to reflect on what everybody said, and in particular, this concept of belonging and creating psychological safety and a space where people feel safe. I think part of the keys to the success of that business that I set up at KPMG was that we actually went deliberately to set it up as a separate space. We actually had a secure room because it was a confidential project, but actually what it worked out to be, everybody felt safe in this secure room. And the room was a virtual room. So it was a physical room, but we also we had a whole team in Portugal and a whole team in India. And the three teams were connected virtually 24/7, okay, in our individual rooms in the three locations. And it created this sense that we were all in it together, no matter what happened. However, I mean, there was some very, very tough deadlines that we were being set by our clients. Can you actually achieve our deadlines? Our business depends on it, and they're putting huge amounts of pressure on us as a team to deliver, but we all came together, and it was a very, very junior team to be able to do really, I think, incredible things. And we had, as I mentioned, we had graduates who had joined this team with some with technical experience and some without. But I think the common denominator was that they were all very keen to learn and very keen to do something that was going to have an impact. And I can tell you that what's really actually, I think, very pleasing is wind forward now, 12 years after the business was started, and some of those junior people who were, literally out of university, one of the consultants who was in India came over to the UK. He's now a partner in the UK firm. Okay. And then we had another very junior graduate in Portugal, and he's now leading all of the technology in Portugal for KPMG. But just to give you an idea that starting from such a very, very junior team, but because they felt so safe and so, I guess, empowered to learn and to do and to deliver, I think so many people got a huge amount out of that environment, that space of belonging for themselves, but also delivering huge value for the company and for our clients, right? So it's just a win-win-win-win for everybody, which I thought was amazing.
That's amazing. And I'm just getting in a question from Fleur, who is a technology entrepreneur and very much a great supporter of kindness. And she was just sharing a story here and has a couple of questions. So if that's okay, I'll just put that to you. So she was at a networking event last week and had a great piece of advice from someone in relation to unkind misogyny that she had encountered, to ask the person who is being unkind to go home and relay the conversation to their wife, daughter, mother, sister, and see what they said. So I think that's a wonderful, just the idea is fantastic, isn't it? And then her question then is, how can we ensure that people remain kind without having to prompt them in such a stark manner? And how do you make an unkind person, especially leaders, kind? So I think that's a great way to continue from here.
Maybe I can just jump in here. I think we shouldn't aim to change everybody else, right? The only person that we can change is ourselves, right? And I think we have to start with ourselves. We can absolutely be in control of how we react to such a person, and there are absolutely people who demonstrate misogynistic, toxic, unkind, terrible behaviors, right? But I feel that if we come at it from a position of role modeling the better way to do business, then the truth reveals itself. It always does. to those around you.
I can
Yeah.
relate a personal story actually. This is about 25 years ago when I was working for a property consultancy company, and there was a vacancy for a finance director's position. I was at the time a senior financial controller. I applied for the role. And the group chief executive, who had a command and control style of management, said, I'm too soft with my team members and I cannot really do the job of a FD in the environment I was in. But I convinced him in the end that you don't have to be ruthless to do your job. You can still be kind and deliver the results. It's all about working together and getting the best, as people have said on this webinar, that it's a team effort, collaboration, working together, understanding each other, and delivering results. In the end, it's about relationships. If you do not have relationships with people, either in the team or even in your outside business environments, nothing will get done, in my personal opinion. So here I am after 25 years, and I've managed to negotiate, hopefully, more often than not, kind leadership with my colleagues here.
So is that actually that I love that the fact of negotiation being a kind thing, and understanding that we need to get to a point where we need to both get what we need or enough of what we need. So is that one of the ways we can ensure that unkind people think about kindness or make them kinder?
I think just on occasions, Nicole, as sort of Natalie said, it's sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes ultimately, to answer Fleur's question, you're not going to change someone, and if they have a certain nature that is not fit for your organization, then the kind thing to do is to encourage them to leave your organization and join an organization that has their values and likes the way that they operate. So I think it's leading with kindness will mean that potentially you attract like-minded individuals, hopefully, that can build an organization. And that's not saying it's not a diverse group of individuals just because they lead with niceness. They can have a different thought processes alongside it. But I think at times, as an organization grows and different skill sets are required, it is more and more difficult to be able to align people to creating a sort of a culture that ensures that you, as much as a group of leaders, you're leading with kindness. There can be individuals that come through and naturally tend to operate in a slightly different way. What I've found in my experience, I've been with the organization for 30 years this year, is that actually they tend not to be the right fit and they naturally leave your organization as long as you're willing to have the open, honest, transparent conversations. The difficulty is when you're trying to be too nice, not kind, and not wishing to upset anyone, and you then end up upsetting a lot of people because those people that are bought into your style of leadership don't actually they don't like how they're being treated by another person. I think that's just in my experience, kind and nice, sometimes it's very close to the two words are very close and you have to differentiate. And you do that bit of a sense check, you tap yourself on the shoulder and say, actually, I'm just being kind, trying to do the right thing here, which might mean that you don't do something with a certain organization or you move away from a certain client even, because actually they don't align to actually how you want your people to be valued and how you want your people to feel.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? Because I literally just had another conversation at a different one of our events, also with a kind leader, and he has started, I think, a couple of years ago now, to bring new clients into the organization and basically show them around and get them to talk to everybody in the organization, because he's found that only then can he guarantee the best service to the client, because then his people immediately engage and they actually basically check the fit, whether the client is a fit for them. And he says in the long term, it's paid off really well to sometimes just say, I'm sorry, but we're not the right organization to work with you because your culture and our culture just will not match because your culture actually isn't kind. And it's a very, it's a very courageous thing to do that, to say no to a potential client. But he said it definitely in the long term, because obviously, it's essential that if you want your culture to be kind, you need to make sure that your people are treated kindly by your clients as well, not just the other way around. not just they
Yeah,
treat the
so
client kindly.
I think in that regard, just briefly, we've done a reasonable amount of mergers and acquisitions historically. And that's the biggest thing. You can look for a business fit and you go, oh my goodness, they offer all the service lines that we're looking to be able to complement. But ultimately, if the values and those individuals don't reflect who you are as an organization and what you stand for, then the one-on-one actually creates 1.5. It doesn't create 2.5. It goes and it creates a lots of headaches and real challenges. So I think it is what we've learned from experience is just look at the individuals, spend some time with them, and then look at the business and then see whether it actually fits or not.
Exactly. And that actually leads us nice to one thing that we've heard so far in our events that people are always terribly interested in is the obstacles. So what is the obstacles that you as kind leaders have faced to, whilst introducing or working on introducing a kind culture, and how did you overcome those? Maybe we can spend the next 2 minutes talking about that.
One of the obstacles we faced in Charities Aid Foundation when our CEO joined and brought me with him was a set of habits and practices that were very process orientated as opposed to people orientated. So people had been in poor practices in terms of how they deal with each other for a long time, and that had not been really talked about. So we had to set out our stall really clearly about what we expected kindness to look like. So as you might expect, it's clearly articulated in the values, it's clearly articulated now in a set of behavioural indicators, and twice a year during the end of year reviews and mid-year check-ins, everybody talks about how this has been displayed during the last 6 months or during the year, and it's baked into our conversations that happen. And every leadership program that we run is built around how do you lead within our values. It's not a generic program. It's not, of course, there are some models in there, but the starting point is how do you lead consistent with our values? And given that one of our values, which is called acting with integrity, has kindness baked right in it in terms of how it's articulated and how it's expressed, then the obstacle of people wanting to behave in a way consistent with the past becomes much more difficult because we are almost surrounding them with conversations about what kindness looks like. And that's taken some time, but it's had a huge effect. And I think one of the things I said to you, Nicole, was, we now face the problem as, unlike our sector, that we have such low staff turnover. We're at 5.2% of our staff turnover, that we're having to think about creatively how we create career opportunities for people, because people come and they want to stay.
Exactly, and that's down from 27%, right? So over 4 years, you reduced it through the change to the kind culture, which is, I mean, my heart just, oh my God, I love this example so much because this is exactly what we're all about. So yeah, well, you should be so proud of yourself. It's a wonderful problem to have, I would suggest.
It is a wonderful problem, and then to go to the business economics, that in the same time we've gone from 700 million, which is our throughput of charitable donations that come in and go out, and in the same period we're now up to 1.25 billion. So we've virtually doubled our throughput of incomings and outcomings that come from donors and go to charities and beneficiaries. So not only has staff turnover come down, but productivity has gone up. And despite all the tough times that we faced, we find ourselves in a very strong position in terms of any of the metrics that you look at. And the main thing that we've changed is a culture that focuses on the human being in terms of our staff and how we operate, as opposed to yet another process or yet another policy or yet another set of practices.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? In the end, and I love the fact that you surrounded. It sort of resonated really strongly with what Andrew said earlier. So you're surrounding people with the culture you want to achieve, and either they will, take to that, and yes, sometimes they will struggle, and we all know, behaviors that have been practiced for a very long time can be very hard to change, and they will. And if they don't want to, then actually they will find a way outside the organization because they just understand this isn't a place I want to be anymore. So that's fascinating. So what other obstacles have you been facing, Lisa?
Um, I think one of the obstacles is when business is struggling,
Mm-hmm.
and when there are really difficult decisions that have to be made within businesses, particularly around downsizing. Over the last 5 years, both from my own experience and seeing multiple clients going through challenges of having to reduce their workforce, um, I think that is an opportunity to really demonstrate how, even in the hardest of times, if you approach something with sensitivity and with kindness, um, as much as you can, bearing in mind the difficulty of the situation and the impact on the individuals, that you will um, be remembered for that, and people will leave the organisation with a sense that they were supported and they were managed with dignity and respect. And I think that is something that many businesses face and will continue to face, with all the changes that are happening as regards roles being displaced with AI and automation. So I think all business leaders need to really think about how they can manage those toughest of conversations where you're actually having to let really good people go who meet all of your values and have created great results for your organization and have had an impact, and who, are everything that you would like, but you simply you can't afford them. So I think that's an obstacle which all leaders need to be really mindful of. And I certainly, I've seen it done as well as it can be, and I've seen it done horrifically badly. And the impact on people, and let's remember that all this is about people, can be really, really devastating. So yeah, I think that's a super important one for all leaders to be mindful of.
Yes, that's the classic scenario of the really difficult conversation, isn't it? That is an extremely difficult conversation, and how can you have that so we both walk away with dignity? Absolutely, that's such an important, point. Arif, what about your obstacles?
Um, I think just picking up on a few comments already made, I would say that, going to the mundane and basics, when it comes to peer reviews, for example, there might be two people doing the same role, but one of them is performing much better. And you would like to be kind to both individuals, but it doesn't mean that the person who is performing better should be rewarded less than the person who is just doing a 9 to 5 job. So in my experience, people like to be treated fairly, but we don't have to treat them equally. That is, in my view, kindness, because you're being fair. And the other one, which is in professional services prevalent, when something goes wrong, people sometimes have got the instinct to start pointing fingers or blaming. So I try to instill a culture of that it's an explained culture, not a blame culture in this organization. If something has gone wrong, try to understand what the issue is and move forward. So it's not the adversity, as we know, but how we deal with it, and that can be done with extreme kindness.
Absolutely.
I was just thinking, kind of maybe reflecting on a couple of the comments that the panelists made, and actually in particular, Lisa, you were talking about in this day and age, we're all facing as leaders a challenging environment, economically, social, politically, AI, what is the impact of that? None of us truly know the full extent of the impact. And so in some ways we are navigating under a lot of uncertainty as leaders here. And it was interesting. I had a chance to take part in a fireside chat last week with Alison Kirkby, who's the CEO of BT, British Telecom, and I got a chance to ask her what was she finding in terms of the values that she had around leadership, what were the obstacles she faced, and in particular around meaningful relationships, so human connection, which is a key part of kindness, right? That's her primary. She says that that's the primary driver of her success, was forming meaningful relationships through her career. She didn't go to university. She started as an Avon lady. She became an apprentice. She made her way up somehow into the telecoms industry, and lo and behold, she's now through hard work and dedication and forming amazing relationships with her people and with her customers and with her investors. She's now the CEO of BT. And I asked her, how has she managed to, because that's her most important value, how is she managing to get this value understood and actually adopted by her people, and in particular the youngest generation? And talking about obstacles, she said the main challenge was that although it's really the job of managers, she as a CEO cannot possibly get her arms around every single person in a 115,000 person organization, but the managers must take on that role with their staff, but they are not equipped. They do not have those core human skills, really, in terms of building those meaningful relationships with their teams and with their customers. And they need more support to really be able to learn those skills that are so critical to being successful as not just as managers, but as leaders of the future. And then going back to Lisa's comment, she then reflected that one of her biggest challenges is that the organization, because of the economic situation, and their strategy has changed, and so they're going to downsize from 115,000 to 45,000. And therefore she needs to be very transparent about this to her people. She does want to share with her people what that BT will be a better organization in the future. There's so much opportunity. Yes, people, we need everybody in this organization to lean into the new strategy, but guess what? It's 60% of the people will no longer be there at the end of that downsizing, and that's the harsh reality. But if she's able to impart that message in a way that's at least compassionate and showing that she understands the human impact that's going to have, and offers the support that she can to people through that journey and through the difficult process that some are going to have to go through because they're going to have to leave, right? She believes that is the key to taking, an organization to the next level. And actually, if you think about it, would you rather have an organization that's downsized from 110,000 to 45,000 or to zero? I mean, I think a lot of businesses are facing an existential crisis right now, and these tough decisions must be taken.
Exactly. And that leads us great, because I've just got another question coming in from Alison, who says, this is a wonderful discussion with fantastic expertise and messaging. My question, to what extent does employment law become a perceived obstacle to kindness in business? And I think it actually, given that she's probably going to have quite a few employment law issues with her downsizing, I thought that was a wonderful follow-on. So let's have a look at that.
I just wanted to give an example maybe that supports what Natalie's just said. I worked for Thomson Reuters some years ago when those two organisations merged, and that included a lot of people losing their roles. And the then CEO that I worked for told me my year's mission was to spend my time preparing all the people who would no longer have a role with the organisation to be fit for what came next. So he absolutely turned his full resources away from the people who were staying towards the people who were leaving. And I think that's a very unusual thing for somebody to have done. And I am still in contact with many of the people now who exited under that scheme, who are hugely grateful for the way in which that was approached and tackled. And Lisa said earlier about she's seen some things done really well and sometimes it's done really horribly. I would say it's probably one of the best ever mass redundancy programs that I've ever been involved in, because the CEO put his heart into the people that were exiting. And I still admire him, although he's no longer a CEO. He's now long retired. But
it's an interesting balance to strike, isn't it? Because in a way you can get that very wrong, because if you completely forget about the people who are leaving, because that's the other thing, right? There will be survivor's guilt, there will be all sorts of stuff that you need to think about there. And it certainly is something that is an absolute interesting balance to strike. So
but it did set the tone. It did set the tone for the people who were staying, in that they saw us treating the people who were exiting with such kindness and dignity that actually, even though we were diverting resources to the people who were leaving, there wasn't a lot of what about me and where's my training gone? It was much more absolutely, this is the right thing to do. Yeah.
That's amazing. That goes back to Natalie. You said this, that the expectation of kindness. You've done some research, haven't you, on the expectation of kindness creates kindness in itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the expectation of kindness, but also when you observe kindness, right? If you see somebody, and especially if you see a leader acting with kindness, the impact it has on other people is incredible. I mean, Barbara, you still remember this episode with that CEO years later, right? And you're relating the story now. The impact is profound, right? And that is something you can't even quantify. What does that mean, right? But in terms of the people who left, I'm imagining the people who left Thomson Reuters, they still, like, they would probably do business with them in a heartbeat. Do you know what I mean? Now that they're somewhere else, right? Because they were treated with such dignity and respect. And the people who stayed behind will think, that's the way to do better business, right?
Andrew.
No, I think there's a huge amount to be said for that. But like you said, sorry, the question being about employment law. Well, of course, we have to live within the constraints of employment law. We must always comply with the law. But complying with the law doesn't mean you have to do it in a way that's inhumane, right? So we're just talking about how do you make something that's a tough message to give, right? Whether or not the employment law is there, having to make people redundant because maybe commercially the business cannot sustain this is a very difficult thing to do. But I think that's a great story, Barbara, about the CEO of Thomson Reuters. Focus, I guess, putting your heart into the future of the people exiting. It is such a great message to send, right?
Okay. And we've got another. Sorry, Lisa.
No, I was just going to say finally, I know, from the KindHive, clarity is one of the 4 things that you focus on. And I think from an employment law perspective, clarity is king. So I think just, I had a situation not that long ago with somebody who was on long-term sick, and just helping them to understand what that means. What does that mean to them? How much time do they have? At what point do they go from full pay to statutory pay? Just I think that gives somebody a sense of agency over their own situation. And I think as leaders, that's also one of our responsibilities to give somebody all of the information so that they can make informed decisions. That's being kind.
Exactly. And I've got another question coming in from Adrian Castrillo, I think is the name. Walt Whitman wrote, "Be curious, not judgmental." curiosity, empathy, and kindness is the same bag, is in the same bag, and that's how I lead. But I do understand that it's easier for everyone to avoid curiosity and jump into conclusion based on biases and judgment. How can we shape, educate the leaders above our reporting structure to be more curious and less judgmental? Very good question, Adrian.
It's just if I just pick up on that one, Nicole, I think it's for some people it comes naturally. Some people it's part of their DNA just to be able to go, how are you, but how are you really? And then to be able to go deeper and to be able to ask those questions just because they're people and they like people and they like understanding more about someone. And I think with others, it is something that you have to work on. It's something that you try and support and you provide guidance and you try and ensure that when you're exposed to different individuals around you, that you are not going to be jumping to any form of conclusion, but you're going to try and hold back from biting that tongue and being able to say, okay, let me listen first, 2 ears, 1 mouth type scenario, and actually engaging with that thought process. But ultimately, I think it is our role models around us at every stage in our life help to form us in respect of who we are and how we act. And the more people that we can get that lead in a style in a way that is naturally kind, then the more opportunity we have to be able to influence other leaders. And if they see all the statistics that actually say successful businesses and the correlation between success in respect of fully engaged colleagues, high performing financials that align to that and kindness, then actually that's the sort of those sort of metrics, those KPIs, they actually fulfill a lot of the requirements. People want to be successful, they want to be happy, they want to enjoy themselves. Well, actually, those align with actually leading with kindness.
Exactly. And Arif, you're one of the most curious people and leaders I know. So tell us how you keep yourself curious in tough times.
I try to make sure that people understand that by asking questions, I'm not putting them on the spot, but trying to get a better understanding of what their issues might be before we move forward. So I do ask a lot of questions, as you know, Nicole. I mean, in my role, that's part of my job to find out as much as I can about issues before the board takes a decision. So some people have not liked being questioned because how dare you, for example. But in the end, it is for the benefit of the organization. And, being kind and being, gentle doesn't mean that you are weak. It shows a sense of maturity you have developed over the years, I would say, that you can try to understand other people.
Yeah, exactly. That's very important. And we've also got a comment following up from your story, Barbara, which I'd love to share with everybody, from Joanne Jurgensen. This is such a pertinent topic, as having experienced redundancy recently, large USA consumer goods company. The hardest part for myself and the whole team who left was how no one checked in afterwards, despite working together for over a decade. For me, as a leader who led with kindness, this impact on all of us was really tough, and it still has been, even though it's 10 months ago. So very much what you were saying earlier, and what Natalie was confirming, that these impacts are incredibly important, and unless you as a leader are very, very clear on that impact, you can really do damage or fantastic stuff.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Nicole, which is
Please.
that these types of behaviors, can easily be seen in the public domain, right? And we see this in the newspapers, et cetera, media, huge redundancies being made by XYZ company, right? And then in the next breath, you'll see journalists report on how those redundancies were made. Sometimes they're made via text message, right? People are, phoned at their desk and told to leave and pack their box of. And you hear these stories, and it does just make everybody just cringes at those stories, right? And the data shows that consumers also vote with their feet, right? So you can see that 61% of consumers will not buy from companies that they perceive to be unkind. Okay, so they you know, if they've seen this and it's still in their memory from the last couple of years, they will actually not buy from that company. And we're seeing it right now with Tesla, with Elon Musk, right? People are refusing to buy new Teslas, and even people are putting stickers on their cars in Germany to say, "I bought this before Elon became a jerk," you know, on their Teslas, right? They before they knew how bad he was, right? So because they don't want their car to be vandalized. But I'm just giving that as a, you know, that might sound like an extreme example, but it's really how people are now being activists, right, against unkindness you know, in organizations.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very, very important point, because if you are bothered about your employer branding, and if you are wanting to be attractive to the best talent, you will have to be very much bothered about your employer branding. Nowadays, everything you do is so open and so you know, publicized everywhere, and Glassdoor's reviews and everything else, it really can get in your way very, very quickly if you are an unkind business. And that's why also the research shows that kind businesses outperform their unkind competitors by 34% EBITDA over 10 years. So the figures, as you said, Andrew, they certainly you know, add up. Now we're getting towards the end. So what I was thinking, what would be a lovely thing to hopefully close with, is what would you recommend to somebody as the first, you know, I don't know, 2 steps, 3 steps, pick a number, who would like to, you know, go on this journey to pivot to become a kind leader?
So I'll start, and I would say sit back and think through all of the people that you have worked through your career, and pick which ones you admire and which ones you have brought out the best in you, and nail the exact behaviors, what it was they did, what it was they said, how they created a psychologically safe environment, and use your own experience to build 2 or 3 behaviors that you want to copy and incorporate into your daily practices. And I would say, you know, atomic habits, start small, but go from your, I would say, I like to go from my own experience and say, I want to be like that person. And so I'm going to do those 2 things that they do that made me want to give me my very best.
Amazing. Thank you. Arif?
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
I'll go
Andrew.
next. I would suggest that people need to think about, if they're in business and in leadership positions, to think about 3 factors. That a business is not a place just to win. It's about a place to belong, to get people engaged. And results and respect can go hand in hand. And, you know, we should not confuse pressure with purpose, because a lot of people get hung up on as to what the purpose of being in business is or in an organization is, and that creates a lot of pressure, I've seen in my experience. So you need to understand there's a difference between purpose and pressure.
Brilliant. Thank you. Andrew, I think you were about to speak.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right, Arif. No problems at all. I was just going to just pick up on that. And in respect to the curiosity piece, I had something that my eldest son sent me earlier on today, which was, the man who asks a question is a fool for a minute. The man who does not ask the question is a fool for eternity. So just that our concept of curiosity, it sort of resonated with me. But I think in respect of the kindness piece and where you start on your journey, it will depend on every individual, but I think it's truly trying to understand at the current time exactly where you are and why you feel you're not kind already, or where it might be within yourself that you feel as though there's areas to be able to develop, because it has to be authentic, it has to be real. I think the concept of being able to actually say, well, I need to do this because it's going to tick that box. You've got to really, it's got to be within you. So you've got to find and go deep inside you to be able to say, well, actually, okay, what is it about me that people may interpret as not being kind, or it might not be hitting the mark, and let me work out why, so I can go into it, and then I can actually say, okay, I get that, this is because of this, I'm going to do this to be able to change that, to be able to get the outcome, but it's for it to be a truly authentic outcome. Because I can guarantee if you come in the office and you're acting different from yesterday because all of a sudden you show genuine interest in someone, they're going to go, what has happened? That is not real. That's not the person I know. So it has to be a transition. It has to be a journey, but it's worth it.
Thank you. Lisa?
Just building on what Andrew just said, I was going to talk about that sort of self-reflection piece, because I think it's important to understand how you show up. I believe I'm a kind leader, and I believe that my teams always see me in that way, treating them with care and compassion. But actually, that's what I think. So I think one of the places to start is to ask them the question, how do I show up to you as a leader? What could I do differently to set you up for success in a different way? What else do you need from me to be your best self? And I think that can be quite confronting for both parts, and you do need to be willing to maybe hear something that you weren't expecting. And I certainly experienced that when I had the opportunity to live and work in Japan, and just dropped myself from London into Japan, and didn't realize straight away that I actually needed to operate differently, and that kindness looked very different there, and the engagement looked very different there, and recognition looked very different. So sometimes you have to step back to go forward, and the best people to help you on that journey is the people around you who are looking up to you and relying on you to lead them. Ask them the questions.
Amazing. And Natalie?
Well, I'd say kindness always starts with you. So for me, it's very important that we firstly recognize what we are already trying to do every day and being intentional. And, and if we do the best we can every day, we should recognize that we are trying to be the best we can. And sometimes we make mistakes. We should be clear to ourselves about what our values are and our purpose, such that we can articulate it to others. We should show care, self-care to, we need to look after ourselves and put on our own oxygen mask before we put on other people's. And we need to connect with ourselves. So I think everything that people are saying on this panel, being able to connect with your real self and ask yourself, am I doing the right thing? Do I know, what my direction of travel is? And it changes, it changes constantly. We have to constantly reevaluate and re-ask ourselves these questions. So I think kindness starts with you.
Great, fantastic. So thank you very much, Natalie, Lisa, Barbara, Arif, and Andrew for joining us on the panel. I'm, the people are still with us, so I think everybody found it as fascinating as I. It was my great privilege to be part of this discussion. So if you're interested in further looking at this webinar again, then if you were registered, all of you who are still on it, you will get a recording, so you can listen back to the bits that you wanted to hear again, or maybe use yourself. And there's certainly some wonderful, clear first steps. So start with yourself, look at yourself, get some feedback, and then spread it from there. So I think that's the message I heard from all the panelists in one way or the other, and the curiosity for each other's feedback and for what you can do to be not only seen as a kind person and a kind leader, but also about feeling and being authentic in everything you do around that is definitely the way forward. So a huge thank you to all of you, and of course to all of you who for your questions and for your participation and for showing up. And for those of you who are in London, you can join us at the KindHive on the 18th of September at the LSE. We're going to do a half-day leadership forum, and hope to see quite a few of you there. And then, of course, there will be coming up more webinars, so we'll keep you posted. Have a wonderful evening and have fun being kind to yourselves, to your teams, and to your communities. All the very
And
best.
join us at the after party on Google Meet.
Exactly.
If you want to ask any
Okay.
questions, see you there.
Thank you.
Exactly. Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Thank you.
you. That was great.
Bye.
Bye bye.